Ever since humanity discovered that there are other places outside of Earth, we've thought about leaving it. On this episode of What If, we're going to do just that. But where would we go? Is building a ring world in space a possibility? Maybe terraforming Venus is our best option for a sustainable life. If we were to leave Earth and create something like a ring world, where would we find the materials to do so? And if we lived on Venus, how different would it be from Earth? More about that later in this episode, but before we blast off, why would we ever want to leave? Well, in this first scenario, Earth would look a little bit different. That's because we're now one of Jupiter's 75 moons. How would Jupiter's super strong gravity affect our lives? What would our sky look like? And how dangerous would this new version of Earth be? All those answers in just a little bit, but right now, let's talk about just how big Jupiter is. This gas giant is so massive that it could hold more than 1,300 Earths. To put it in perspective, if Earth was the size of a grape, Jupiter would be the size of a basketball. Currently, we have just a single moon. Jupiter has 75, so yeah, Jupiter's a pretty big deal. And while orbiting it might be a dream come true for all you photographers, getting the perfect picture for Instagram is the least of your worries because every day is a struggle for survival. Being a moon of Jupiter would be pretty terrible. But why? Well, for one thing, the temperature is ridiculously cold. But don't just take our word for it. We spoke to astrophysicist Jack Lissauer to tell us more about this scenario.
If you took Earth and put it around Jupiter now, then, of course, the sun would be much fainter. There'd be a lot less energy input in our biosphere from solar radiation, and the atmosphere would quickly cool off.
Depending on where you are on the planet, the temperature ranges between minus 145 degrees to minus 220 degrees. This is because Jupiter is an average of 778 million kilometers from the Sun. That means Jupiter only gets 3.7% of the light that Earth gets, so it's going to be a lot darker in your neighborhood. And the days could be long ones. Compared to the length of a 24-hour day, Jupiter's closest moon, Io, nearly doubles Earth with days that are about 40 hours long. Wonder how long the days would be on our ring world? Or on Venus? Wait, let's not leave so fast. We should try to make life circling Jupiter work. With temperatures like this, we'd need to find a completely new way to live on Earth. What would be the best option for humans to survive these treacherous conditions? Would it be living in heated domes? Wearing super insulated spacesuits? Or living underground? Think about that, and we'll have the answer for you soon. For now, let's talk about some other things you'll have to avoid on our new moon planet. The gravitational pull from Jupiter's other moons, as well as the planet itself, would create extreme tidal forces.
So tidal forces, of course, are greater if the object that creates the tides is more massive. So moon creating tides on the Earth is, moon is not that massive, so the tides on Earth are very small, but Jupiter creating tides on its moon Io is much, much more massive.
These would generate lots of heat on Earth, but only internally. For example, Jupiter's external temperature averages minus 145 degrees, but its core is as hot as parts of the Sun. So inside our planet would be pretty toasty. But that'll be about the only good thing that comes from moving Earth to Jupiter. In addition to heating the Earth's core, Tidal waves would also bring daily earthquakes, tsunamis, and volcanic eruptions to Earth.
So for sufficiently strong tidal forces, you can have arbitrarily strong earthquakes, arbitrarily high tsunamis, like kilometer sizes even, which is almost incomprehensible.
As if trying to avoid all these hazards isn't enough, there's also the possibility of getting cooked to death. Jupiter's magnetic field is 10 times stronger than Earth's, meaning that it emits 1,000,000 times more radiation than what we're used to.
If you're as close to Jupiter as Io is to Jupiter, the radiation you would experience from ions trapped in Jupiter's magnetic field is an order of magnitude more per day than the lethal radiation for a human being.
So how can you survive this new treacherous planet? Well, having a superheated dome and special suits would certainly help. But your best bet for surviving would be to live underground. This is actually not so different from what's happening on Earth today. In certain corners of the world, the rich elite are building underground bunkers to survive a potential apocalypse. Their subterranean safe havens are designed to withstand impending disasters like bombs, pandemics, and maybe even surviving being a moon of Jupiter. But if you were to live underground, how long do you think you could last? How would your mind handle this new living environment? And what would you do for food? You could dig down towards the Earth's core and harness its geothermal energy. That means taking heat from the Earth, extracted from hot water and rock, creating steam. The steam would then rotate a turbine, activating a generator, and from this, you can get power. Luckily for you, producing geothermal energy may be even easier, considering you're now near Jupiter, so the Earth's core is hotter than ever before. Okay, now that you have power, how do you get drinkable water? Since all the water on the planet's surface would be full of radiation, you're going to have to dig below until you find a source of water. Just remember to be careful, as digging around in your underground bunker could easily cause flooding or cave-ins. And remember, you'll need to purify your water before you drink it. Man, you've sure been digging for a while, so you must be hungry. Hopefully you stocked up on lots of canned food before bunkering down here, but even that would only last so long. If an entire society were living underground, we'd need to figure out a way to feed all these people. If you wanted to actually have a chance at surviving, you'd have to build hydroponic gardens to grow fruits and vegetables. This would allow you to garden without soil. People use them today to grow herbs, fruits, and veggies all year round. They don't take up as much space since you can stack them vertically. Hydroponic gardens also grow faster and more consistently than traditional gardens. And sure, let's bring in some farm animals as well so you don't have to go vegan. After all, this bunker will be quite massive and they can provide fertilizer for the garden. So this all sounds pretty good. You've got your home, your food, and your water, but living underground will still come with its challenges. If you happen to stumble upon a cave as you're digging, you might think it's a good thing, but that may not be the case. Living underground, there are thousands of diseases lingering about. One of these diseases comes from ticks. If you get bitten by one of them, you could contract what's known as cave fever. Symptoms involve chills, headaches, stomach pain, and fever. Eventually you'll get better, for a while, but the symptoms will come back again. Hopefully you brought your medicine, as the only cure for this is lots of medication and vaccines. Now, if you manage to avoid cave fever, there's another thing you could fall victim to: your mind. Without consistent sunlight, you won't get any vitamin D, possibly making you depressed, not to mention irritable.
If we don't entrain our clocks, or circadian clocks, this alignment is lost, and this is cause of different diseases, such as cancer and metabolic diseases, such as obesity and diabetes.
If the Earth were suddenly moved into the orbit of Jupiter, then Jupiter would no longer protect Earth from cometary bombardment.
as a much, much smaller planet than Jupiter, it's unlikely Earth could absorb these kinds of impacts. This means Earth, including the underground bunkers you built, would be at risk of getting completely destroyed, or at least being significantly chipped away at. So it's pretty evident that living here would be impossible. But what if we didn't have to live here? What other options are there for humanity? Imagine humanity lived on a ring with a radius of 150 million kilometers encircling the Sun. Or what if we managed to terraform Venus to look like this? If humanity had to leave Earth, where would be the best place for us to go? Would it be a ring world like this? Or living on a terraformed Venus? Stick around and we'll find out what the best option is. But first, what is a ring world anyway? A ring world would be a massive ring around the Sun. It would have its own gravity, ecosystem, and atmosphere. And as opposed to being cramped underground, it would be much bigger than Earth. 3 million times bigger, to be exact. Big enough for trillions of people to call it home. You would live on the landmass on the inside of the ring. The outer shell would protect you and a trillion other people from the hazards of outer space. But how would you build something like that? Well, not so fast. First, we're going to look at another potential home, Venus. In some ways, Venus is quite similar to Earth. At times, it's even referred to as Earth's sister planet. Both planets are roughly the same size, have the same mass, the same gravity, and they're both made of the same material: a central iron core and a rocky mantle. Unfortunately, the comparisons end there. Before we colonize Venus, we need to change a couple of things. The scorching temperatures, the incredibly dense atmosphere, and the toxic fumes would be the first things on our list.
I like to think of Venus as its surface is just 50 kilometers too low. Its surface is kind of like this, you can imagine drilling down 50 kilometers down on Earth. It's also would be a hot hellhole. That's kind of what Venus is like.
We'd need to put some serious work into Venus before we could call this planet home. But our other option, the ring world, wouldn't be a cakewalk either. If we built a structure this massive, what kind of impact would it have on the solar system? Would it remain the same as it is today? Would all other planets get completely destroyed? And would we even be able to build it with our current technology? We wouldn't be able to just stretch the Earth and reassemble it into a ring world. One of our biggest problems would be finding the material to make this thing. The International Space Station, roaming Earth's lower orbit right now, weighs about 420 tons. Something as massive as our ring world would be no less than 1,000,000 tons. Where would we find all the material needed to build it? Well, we could travel to Neptune to find some of it. The Kuiper Belt, beyond the orbit of Neptune, is a ring of icy bodies that stretches out for almost 3 billion kilometers. Although a lot of these asteroids are comprised of ice and water, there will be plenty of regular asteroids made of rock. Some astronomers believe that the Kuiper Belt has enough material for this project. But who really knows? It's hard to tell exactly how much material we'd need since humanity has never made anything like this before. To build something like this, we may need to sacrifice all the planets, moons, and asteroids in our solar system. We'd just be a lonely ring floating in space. But hopefully this doesn't happen before we figure out if Venus is a viable option for us to live on. What would we need to do to make Venus habitable? Well, we know that the two most significant issues we'd need to solve would be the atmosphere and the temperature on the planet. The surface of Venus is a sweltering 462 degrees, hot enough to melt lead.
The atmosphere on the surface is also not very hospitable. It's 95 times thicker than Earth's atmosphere is.
There's no way we could survive on a surface this hot. One way to tame the heat, though, might be with hydrogen bombs. When reacting with the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, hydrogen bombs would create graphite and water. This would fall to the planet's surface and cover 80% of it with oceans. Just don't expect any Venus deep-water diving, as the planet will only have 10% as much water as Earth. But with this water, it will cool down the planet and absorb the heat. Similar to the ringworld, we'd need to do some serious resource mining to make this work. We'd have to harvest hydrogen from Jupiter and Saturn and get iron aerosol from asteroids. If our hydrogen bombs went according to plan, the incredibly dense carbon dioxide-filled atmosphere of Venus would be reduced to just 3 times as heavy as Earth's. Okay, that's more manageable. In addition, the sulfuric acid clouds that hang over the planet would also be reduced. Okay, so the atmosphere is clear. Now, what about the temperature? Before we figure that out, let's check back in with our potential ring world. Now that we have our materials, how are we going to build this ring world? Okay, here's the news. It would take millions of hours of physical labor, an army of robots, and possibly hundreds of generations to see this plan to completion. And even as we're building our ring world, we'll start to realize that this structure isn't stable enough. Because this megastructure is so enormous, it would break all known molecular bonds. We'd have to find a way to make use of one of the fundamental forces of nature, the strong nuclear force. Of all forces, it's the strongest. It bonds material on the scale of the atomic nucleus so that nothing can break apart. Maybe we could build it out of one of the strongest materials known to man, graphene. But this material is incredibly rare and difficult to produce. Until we figure out how to mass produce it, every interstellar body passing through our solar system would be a threat to the ring world. Now, transforming Venus would also take its fair share of science fiction technology. In order to cool the extremely hot planet, we'd need to divert the rays of the sun. One way to do this would be with solar shades. This could be done with a series of small spaceships, or one large lens. Solar shades would either be placed on the surface of Venus or in its atmosphere. Not only would they cool down the planet, but they'd also reduce radiation. Another issue we'd need to worry about before we started to live on Venus. Alright, so far so good. We have a suitable atmosphere, a proper temperature, and clean air. But there's one more thing we're forgetting about. The days and nights on Venus last an incredibly long time. Venus rotates once every 243 Earth days, meaning a single day on Venus is 5,800 hours long. A similar issue would occur on the ring world, with inhabitants experiencing 24/7 daylight. We could solve this with panels inside the ring. Not only could they block the sun to simulate nighttime, but they'd also be able to harvest the sun's energy. To solve this issue on Venus, we could use massive mirrors that would rotate and reflect the sun. Sure, controlling the sun seems like a pretty enormous task, but we've already come this far, so come on, let's just take it one step further. If we could manage to do all this, Venus would feel just like home, except with a touch more gravity. Luckily for the Ringworld colony, they wouldn't have to worry about a different gravity from that of Earth. That is, if they can get the Ringworld to spin at a speed of at least 200 million kilometers per hour. I know, that's quite fast, but it'd build up speed over time. And once we reached the desired speed, maintaining it wouldn't be hard in the frictionless environment of space. This would create a centrifugal force, which in turn would create artificial gravity equal to what we have on Earth. But despite the harsher gravity that we'd find on Venus, it would still be very habitable. Not only that, but we might not end up living on the planet's surface for quite some time. Similar to the Ringworld, building an entire new civilization could take generations. According to NASA, we may end up in floating cities on top of the atmosphere. These would be safe living spaces that we'd occupy as we slowly learn more about the planet and terraform it.
With sufficiently advanced technology, you could have a cloud city on Venus. And there's opinions differ on whether it's easier to terraform or it's easier to have a habitable colony on Venus as a cloud city or on the surface and terraform it.
So, with all we've learned about Venus, it really wouldn't be a horrible option for humanity to colonize? Sure, the planet would rotate the other way and you'd get a different view of the sun, but this is an option humanity might consider. Scientists even look at Venus as a backup planet for Earth one day.
So this is all speculation, but it's fun to speculate. And there's no laws of physics that preclude us from terraforming planets and terraforming Venus in particular. It's just a question of the will and the technology.
Now, don't worry, we haven't forgotten about our ring world. Would this megastructure be as viable as Venus? Well, probably not. That's because this epic megastructure we created will likely be incredibly unstable. A single minor asteroid strike would cause the ring world to drift closer to the sun. And that's one of the more positive scenarios. An asteroid strike could also pierce through the ring, causing it to lose its atmosphere. A single failure inside the ring could doom the entire structure, as well as its inhabitants. So, if we were to look for a new home after living on a moon of Jupiter, Venus would be a relatively good option. It would take a lot of work and resources, but if completed properly, it could feel just like Earth. Where will we go next time on the show? A humanless world? Falling into a pool of snake venom? Or maybe just seeing what happens if you were to eat mold? We'll leave all these stories and more for another What If.